IVM. Hey everyone, welcome to the Positively Unlimited podcast. This cycle of A to Z is all about relationships, and I hope you tuned into the episode that came out this Monday, yes, day before yesterday, which was A for acceptance. Well, surprise, surprise, I'm here again today. From now on, I'm going to be releasing 2 episodes every week. So today's episode is B for boundaries. Something that is imperative to build a healthy, fulfilling relationship, and something that all of us struggle with. It's no surprise that I chose this topic today. And no, this is not the first episode when I've spoken about boundaries. Make sure that after you listen to this episode, you tune into episode number 69, which is about drawing boundaries. The tools that I shared in that episode will definitely help you, along with the perspective that I'm going to share with you in today's episode. Let me just start off by saying that boundaries are not about control. Yes, just repeat that sentence in your head. Boundaries are not about control. In fact, healthy boundaries are an expression of love. As odd as it may sound, how can putting up walls or creating fences be anything about love? And that's where we're all mistaken. Boundaries are not about putting up walls. They're not about building fences. They're not about creating separation and distance. Then what are boundaries all about? Well, love is a verb. It is expressed through action, consistent action. Boundaries are one such set of actions. When you create healthy boundaries, when you place healthy boundaries in your relationships, well, you are one, safeguarding your own self and creating a space, a safe space from where you can love freely. You can be who you are and you can express the love you feel the way you want to. When your partner accepts these healthy boundaries that you have placed and has his or her own set of boundaries and you respect those, you both create a space, a safe space to love the way you both can love and were born to love. But most of us are placing boundaries out of fear. Fear of losing ourselves. Fear of being forced to do something that we don't want to do. Fear of becoming somebody that we really aren't. And what's even worse? Well, the ones who aren't able to place any boundary in the first place. Who just give in and become whoever it is their partner or the relationship demands. And over time then have to deal with resentment and complete loss of self. So how do you place healthy boundaries? And how do you communicate this to your partner in a manner where your limits are respected, your preferences are respected? Step 1 to placing a healthy boundary is understanding your own self very, very well. What you like, what you don't like, what you prefer, what you would rather avoid, what is okay with you and what is not okay with you, what makes you feel afraid, what gets you angry, what irritates you, what disappoints you, what slams your insecurities. Understanding your own self from all of these different angles is very, very important for you to be able to place a healthy boundary. So that's where you want to start. Take a paper and pen and write down what you like, not like, prefer, would rather avoid, what is okay with you, what is not okay with you. Write a list of everything that you know about yourself. Now, once you've done that, think about your relationship, think about your partner, and write about the different scenarios in which they cross the line and make you feel uneasy. In this particular case, I know that a lot of us also face this issue with families of our partners or our own families. Well, we're learning to place boundaries. And yes, this A to Z is all about relationships and your love life, but our respective families do play a role in how our relationship feels to us. So if you are struggling with a particular family member, go ahead and make a list of how they are crossing the line. Or should I say how and where they are crossing the line. So you've made a list of your likes and dislikes, your preferences, what's okay, what's not okay. You've made a list about your own self. Then you've made a list about how specific people in your life are crossing the line, whether you're talking about your partner or whether you're talking about a family member. Now we come to step 3, which is about placing the boundary. Sometimes placing a boundary is about saying no to something with a rationale that is explained. Sometimes placing a boundary is about asking somebody to stop and to back off. Sometimes placing the boundary is simply about expressing how you don't like what is happening or what is being said or what is being asked of you. If you struggle with saying no or with communicating firmly, make sure you listen to episode number 13, Make Conscious Choices, and episode number 28, which is all about being assertive and not argumentative. I'm sure that the tips I've shared in those 2 episodes will help you express your boundaries. Now, let me also talk about respecting someone else's boundaries. Yes, because it's a two-way street, isn't it? So it's one thing to place a boundary, but a lot of times, so many of us place boundaries, but it is our partners or other loved ones who don't respect those boundaries. And I'm hoping that some of them are listening to this particular episode. So if you are somebody who fails to recognize and respect someone's boundaries, well, listen up. When your partner says that they don't like something, learn to accept it. Don't push them, or don't try to convince them, or don't try to question their likes and dislikes. It's okay if the two of you all have 2 different likes. It's perfectly normal. Listen to their tone or their voice when they are expressing what they don't like, when they are expressing what is making them feel uneasy, what is upsetting them. The worst thing you can do when somebody is trying to express themselves is to argue with them, to explain to them how what they are feeling is not true or not important or not valid. So many times we fail to place a boundary because we're afraid of losing our partner. We're afraid or upsetting or disappointing them. We're afraid that we will be ridiculed or that we will be told that what we are feeling is invalid. We will have to experience rejection. So to each and every one listening to this episode, as one half of a relationship, it is your responsibility to create a space for your partner to be able to express their likes, dislikes, their preferences, and to be able to create the space for them to place their boundaries safely. Have you been doing that in your relationship? Can you start doing it from this moment on? A lot of us aren't willing to accept the boundaries that our partners place because it inconveniences us, because it pushes us to change something about ourselves, because that boundary makes us feel like we are not in control. Sometimes it's also the ego that rises up and that does not allow us to accept the boundary that someone else has placed. We feel offended. But a lot of times, all of this is coming up from one simple problem. We aren't making the effort or we aren't able to understand what our partner is communicating. Going back to those who are trying to place boundaries, a good way of placing a boundary is to communicate what is actually going on. And in order to communicate what is actually going on, here's a sentence that you can use. When you do this, it makes me feel like this. And so I would like it if you didn't behave in this manner or you didn't ask this of me. It's a simple phrase. Use it. It will help you avoid any drama that your emotions are creating. Boundaries are an act of self-love. Accepting boundaries, well, that's also an act of love. I hope that this episode helps a lot of y'all to change certain habits in your relationship. Remember this: placing a boundary is not going to make your partner run away. Placing a boundary may cause temporary conflict. But if you are able to communicate, if placing a boundary can create conflict, if you have sustained certain habits, if you are going to try and change a way of functioning overnight, well, your partner is going to resist. We all resist change. Think about your own self. How hard is it to make a change? Well, extend compassion towards your partner then when you are trying to change status quo. Be willing to talk about things. Be willing to fight it out as well. Be willing to agree to disagree in certain cases. Know your relationship is not so weak that by placing one boundary, you are going to destroy it or it is going to end. Remember, placing healthy boundaries is an act of self-love. And accepting boundaries is an act of love. On that note, I'm going to head out of here and I'm going to catch you next week with 2 more episodes in the A to Z cycle. This time we're talking all about relationships. For all previous episodes, you can go on to the IVM website or download the IVM podcast app. And to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter, look us up. Our handle is IVM Podcasts. To reach out to me and to talk to me and let me know how these episodes are helping you, my Instagram handle is Positivity Angel. I hope to hear from you. I do love to see all your messages in my DMs. And on that note, I hope you have a beautiful week of self-discovery and realigning your relationship.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Intel, for supporting us. First, right off the bat, want to congratulate Ashton Doctor on celebrating the 300th episode of The Habit Coach. It's a great show. If you haven't been listening to it, listen to it now. And if you listen to it, you can almost go for an entire year with an episode a day. It's really fun. Do definitely check that out. Arjun Koladi, the head of sales for Spotify in India, was on Advertising is Dead. Do check that out. Really fun show. On Cyrus Says, we had Samit Basu, the author, fantasy author, one of my favorites. Definitely do check that out. It was Utsav Memorial Week this week on the IVM network. He was on Cyrus Says Cock and Bull on Thursday. He was on Litnama and, of course, his own podcast, Postcards from Nowhere. Do check that out. And one last note before we go. IVM Likes is back, and we've been doing a bunch of interesting conversations about different pop culture things that you might want to check out during the pandemic. Do give it a listen. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Remember the last vacation you took? What about the one you took 3 years ago? Okay, how much do you really remember? It's a question I've asked myself often over a decade of traveling the world. Hey, I'm Utsav, and I do not travel the world for a living. I have a full-time job and responsibilities, but I have made traveling the world a priority. Priority enough that I negotiate extra leave in my job contracts, obsessively track my frequent flyer miles, and I'm willing to take off at the sight of a cheap ticket. Yes, I am cheap. I've lived and worked in 3 countries. I understand human behavior for a living. And these experiences have given me unique insights into places, people, and culture. With over a decade of travel behind me, I increasingly realized one thing, that we cannot see everything. So whatever we see, we must see deeply. Because as the film of memory decays, the imprints which will stand the test of time are the ones felt by the immersion of the senses, not by fleeting encounters with them. Postcards from Nowhere is an immersion into the world of slow travel, one story at a time. Tune in every Thursday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.